Okay, I got it all wire wheeled, wire brushed, starting to look pretty good. Okay, now we want to get it back together. Again, you want to make sure you check all the openings and all the jets before you put them back. I've blown everything out with compressed air. And then you want to just make sure everything is open. Okay. Then what I do is I take the tri-flow and I squirt it in just about every orifice there is, a lot in the bowl. Get that in. Then I take my compressed air and I kind of blow that all down inside the carburetor and blow any water out that might have remained in there. I've checked the high jet, made sure it's open. And by putting the tri-flow in the carb like that, and then using the compressed air to blow it down in there, it displaces any water, puts the oil in there, and like I said, this is a highly flammable oil. And I put my emulsion tube gasket back on. I make sure this little nylon washer is on the seat. Put the seat in. And one thing about these seats is you want to make sure you have a good screwdriver bit that fits them. Don't try and do it with a small bit. This brass is soft and you'll just booger it up. So get you a bit that fits it good. Just snug it in there. Okay. Alright. And you want to take your float, make sure your needle's good and clean. I have found no literature that tells me this clip has to be one way or another, so I always put it on toward me, pushing away from me. Also on these floats you'll see a little tab right here. That's the adjustment tab to adjust the level of the float. And that always points down. So, and if you need to adjust it, that's what you're going to do it with, is that little tab. Okay. Now you've put that in there. Then you're going to take your little hinge pin. Again, I found you can put this hinge pin either way. I just tend to do things from habit, pushing away from me. There you go. The float basically should be even with the body. I have a little cheesy tool that you can use to make sure it is, but you can also just look at it and make sure it's horizontal. If it's flopped way down inside the bowl, you want to adjust it with this little tab. If it's sticking way up, you want to adjust it with that little tab. That is your adjustment for the float. Then you want to make it go up and down, make sure it's pulling the needle. Alright, one thing I always do with these gaskets is I take a little bit of petroleum jelly, put some on my finger, and just put it all over these gaskets. It helps to stick them, and when I put them in place, it don't hurt a thing. It's quite soluble with gasoline. And so then you just want to line up. There is one hole, one extra hole that ain't a screw hole in the gasket. It's where the fuel comes in. You want to make sure that's there. Just kind of smash the gasket and even it out around the edge. Make sure the holes are good and lined up. Okay. Alrighty. Now we're ready to put the bowl back on. Bowl only goes one way. Always make sure that emulsion tube gasket's in there. That's an important gasket. Okay, and take your screws. I always give them a good squirt of Tri-Flow as well. Crisscross tighten the screws. I don't think it's super important, but that's what you want to do. Again, habit. Make sure they're good and snug. All right. Then it's good to go. Try that again. There we go. When you're tightening in these brass parts, just gently snug. Remember, this was 2 out from a light seat, so that's what we'll set it at for the initial setting, and then we can adjust it once we put it on the engine and get the engine running. There's a light seat. So there's a 1/2 and 1, 1/2 and 2. Okay. Now there's one more little thing I got to get for that real quick. Okay, that's this little fella. That was missing again. I like to put a little dab of Vaseline on that too. There we go. There she went. All right. That is a clean carburetor, ready to go on the engine. And that's generally how I do them. This is what I call a quick clean. Like I said, I didn't put it through the ultrasonic cleaner or anything. But most of the time I don't. Most of the time it's just like this. And they'll do just fine. And we'll put this on the engine once we get the engine ready to go. And yeah, she should be just fine. So, there you go. That's how I clean a carburetor. Okay, we're gonna take this carb off. I'm gonna show you how to get the carb off. This is that 30 horse Johnson. I've cleaned it up a little bit. When you start, your engine may or may not have an air silencer on it. If it does, there'll be 3 screws. Find my screwdriver. There'll be 3 screws, 1, 2, 3. You take those out, and then right back here, there'll be, right there, there'll be a screw with a nylock nut on it. Just take a pair of needle nose vice grips, clamp onto that nylock, back the screw out, then this whole thing will come off. The knobs just pry out. You just put up under there, and you just pry them off. A lot of times you can just grab them and pull them out. Get that out of your way. Okay, in order, if it's got the electric start on it, let me get set up. Okay, if it's got the electric start on it, in order to take the carburetor off, you got to take the electric starter off in order to get the right hand carburetor nut off. You cannot get it off without taking that carburetor off, or excuse me, taking that starter off. The starters, sorry about that, the starter's really pretty simple to get off. If it's been in salt water for a while, corrosion set in, things can get a little tricky then. But to take this starter off, you've got these 2 little screws here. This one happens to be little bolts, but a lot of times they're screws, slotted screws. You take those off to get that little clip off, because the bracket that holds the starter also, you take these little clips off. There'll be one behind it, one in front of it generally. And that's this upright here that works, advances your magneto timing. So then you'll have a 3/8 inch bolt here that'll need to come out. Then you'll have one, if you can see it, let's see if I can get this over here a little bit, get the light back down in there. Hopefully you can see that. There's one here that goes forward. It screws in from the back. Sometimes, to get easier access, you can get a heavier screwdriver. This bracket that holds the solenoid to the starter bracket, those bolts come in up like that. So what you can do sometimes, of course, everything's unhooked from the battery, so you don't have to worry about sparking or anything. You can come in from behind here and sometimes wiggle that solenoid out. This one's really loose, but you get the idea. You're going to basically pry that solenoid out of there by prying on those 2 gently. And you may or may not be able to get it. If you can get it, you can get to this 3/8 inch bolt here a lot easier. Also, in the front, above the carburetor and to the right, there's a 7/16 inch nylock bolt that has to come off. So you're going to take that one off, this 3/8 that goes forward, that 3/8 inch bolt screw there, the 2 screws and the clip holding the magneto upright off, and then the starter is wiggled forward and comes off. So let me get those out and we'll pull that off. Okay, we got that bolt out, that bolt out, these 2 screws out. This is ready to come off. We got the 7/16 inch nylock. This should come out of here now. Sometimes you got to wiggle and tap, and there you go. Set that out of your way. Okay, now you can get to that nut there that holds that on. Okay. These are 1/2 inch nuts here. Okay, just loosen them. As far as this little clip, let me get the camera right. There we go. This little clip right here, just give it a whack. There you go. That comes off. Doesn't matter if it stays here or here, either way. Just kind of Okay, over on this nut, you can move the butterfly linkage so as to let you get a little better access to this nut over here. And that's pretty much all there is to taking these carbs off. Now you've got all these hoses. I'll show you the way to get them all off. When you're unscrewing the carburetor, it helps if you kind of wiggle things around a little bit and pull it towards you a little bit, because as you back the nuts off, they hit up against the body of the carburetor in there. So you got to just kind of wiggle and unscrew everything so it's coming off as a unit. Now you'll have 3 different hoses. This is a 30 horse Johnson, old beater engine we had. And you'll have 3 different hoses on this thing. Okay, and there's your gasket too. If you're going to reuse the gasket, inspect it real good, make sure it's in good shape, clean it all up, and then what I like to do is coat it with a good coating of Vaseline, and that helps a little bit. So this is also a good time to look inside, check your reeds out, make sure it's not anything inside your intake, and look that over good. As far as these hoses, the best way to get them off is get you something along this lines and nip, do them all like that, cut them off. That's how I get the hoses off. So this carburetor's off, and then you would be able to clean it, and I'll show you how to do that. So for putting it back on, just reverse the order. And once I get this back on, everything, and you'll see me clean the carburetor, how I do it and everything, and then we'll put it all back on there, get the starter all hooked back up, and see if we can get this thing to start.